unto these yellow sands, and then take hands. Curtsied when you haven't kissed.
I'm Carla Burkett. I'm the Artistic Director of Laark Productions. It has been our good fortune to present Shakespearean plays for the last 7 years to our fellow Arizonans. And I'm really excited and pleased to get to introduce The Tempest to you. The Tempest is one of my favorite plays. It was one of my greatest challenges as a director and one of my most rewarding experiences. We presented The Tempest at Arcasante in 2015, and it was the first opportunity we had to do Shakespeare at Arcasante and our first attempt at The Tempest. One of the most important things when you're presenting Shakespeare is being able to present the characters clearly to the audience. Our modern audience comes in not understanding that they might be joining these characters in the middle of their experience. Oftentimes, Shakespearean characters walk on stage in the middle of a conversation or arrive with a whole lot of backstory that's happened off stage. So having a cast that can clearly interpret the characters so the audience knows what they're looking at is really important. The cast of The Tempest presented a challenge in that there are two worlds presented in The Tempest. There's the human world, and then there's a magical, spiritual realm that are also embodied on stage by human actors in a real time and space. And so to differentiate the spiritual characters, the characters who are perhaps invisible part of the time, from the human characters is a real challenge as a cast. I was really fortunate to have a fantastic cast in this play, presenting both the human characters, Prospero, his daughter Miranda, Alonso, the King of Naples, and his son Ferdinand, his brother Sebastian, Prospero's brother Antonio. All of these relationships are really key to the play and really important for the audience to understand what's going on. In addition to those human characters, there are the spirits of the island, because the Tempest, once the storm has taken place, the inhabitants of the play are on a deserted island. And to understand that some of the people that you see on the island are not actually humans, but are spirits who inhabit the island, and maybe from an older world or a different world anyway, a magical world, an unseen world. This was a really challenging and exciting part of the play, is seeing the two different worlds side by side and watching them interact. Some of the characters, most especially Caliban, is a half-breed. His mother was a witch. His father was a demon. So while he is a human character, he has a spiritual element to him that you need to understand in understanding how he reacts and how he behaves in the play and how other people react to him. There are multiple plots in The Tempest, but briefly the story goes something like this. It begins with a violent storm at sea which destroys the flagship of the King of Naples' fleet, and the passengers, including Alonso the king, Ferdinand his son, and Sebastian his younger brother, are cast away on an apparently deserted island where strange music, voices, and magical events bewilder them. The unseen inhabitants of the island are ancient spirits led by Ariel, the spirit of the air, who is imprisoned by his debt to the magician Prospero. Prospero and his daughter Miranda have been on the island since they were abandoned there by his usurping brother Antonio, and he was helped by Alonso the king. Their lives were only saved through the kindness of an old advisor, Gonzalo, who made sure that they were provisioned when they were set adrift at the sea. Through the tempest raised by Ariel and the spirits of the island, all of these former enemies and friends have been brought back into Prospero's realm, so he sees his opportunity to get revenge and to set things right. Separated from the ship's company and believing he is the only survivor, Ferdinand the Prince is led by Ariel to meet Miranda, and the two young people immediately fall in love. Prospero, however, sets Ferdinand heavy tasks to test him and prove that he's worthy of Miranda. Meanwhile, on another part of the island, Antonio is still up to his old tricks and begins to plot with Sebastian, the king's brother, to take the life of the king.
But Ariel and the other spirits continue to interrupt and confuse the castaways and keep this from happening. As the skies rumble with thunder, Trinculo, the court jester, who's been separated from the others, takes shelter and finds the slave Caliban. Staggering drunkenly across the island, Stefano, the king's butler, comes across these two, and Caliban, upon drinking Stefano's wine, begins to worship him as a god, and the three plot to bring down the men in charge and rule the island as their private kingdom. All of these plots and counterplots cannot continue, with the spirits, both seen and unseen, continuing to drive the mortals about the island. In the final scene, the many inhabitants of the island are finally brought together. The family members are reunited. The rivalries are laid to rest, and the marriage of Prospero's daughter and Alonso's son is blessed.
One of the wonderful things about doing Shakespeare is getting to explore the world of the play, getting to shape the world of the play. As a director and as a cast, we worked really closely together so that we could understand the balance of the world. We read about Shakespeare and we read about the humors, and how all the physical humors were supposed to be in balance all the time. And if you had too much choler, then you were a choleric person, or if you had too much bile, then that made you out of balance. And that's where a lot of the conflict in the worlds in Shakespeare come from. In approaching The Tempest, I could see that the characters weren't representing, as we know, the Elizabethan ideas of the humors so much as representing the elements. So earth, air, fire, water, those four elements were part of the world that we created in our play. And if those things are out of balance, if fire has more power than water, then you're going to burn up. If air is stronger than earth, you're going to have an imbalance in your world. So it was fun to place the characters in the play into the idea of this world of balances of earth, air, fire, and water, and see that Prospero, with his need for revenge on his brother, was really a fiery character. His daughter Miranda, who is more or less a creature of the sea since she was brought ashore at this desert island in a boat and has never grown up anywhere other than this, is a water character. She's about love where he's about passion. Ariel is a spirit of the air, but he's imprisoned by Prospero because Prospero has freed him from a true imprisonment in a tree, but Ariel doesn't wish to be tied to the earth. He wants to be free and be a spirit of the air as he was intended to be. Caliban is tied very specifically to the island itself and is really a creature of earth. He is earthy in his character. He's earthy in his conversation. He is very much tied just to the ground. And so these characters juxtapose each other. They balance each other. We can see really clearly at the beginning of the play, in The Tempest itself, that everything is out of whack. Fire is coming from the sky in the form of lightning. Water is swamping the ship. The air is screaming with voices. The people in the ship aren't even touching the earth. They are at a loss. They are at sea, quite literally, and none of these things are in balance. And by the end of the play, we have to see that these things come into balance. Miranda and Ferdinand the Prince become a couple, and they create a balance between the old and the new. Ariel is freed by Prospero. Caliban is more or less forgiven by Prospero, and we come into a balance there with air and earth. And so we find order at the end. This is not a comedy. It's not a tragedy. It's a romance. It's a fairy tale. It is an exploration of these ideas of balance and imbalance and the coming together and the working out of ancient grudges in the marriage of the young couple. It's about the ideas of service, the idea that you can serve someone who is your master and it is service, or you can be a slave and it is more servitude. It's about leadership. It's about the king leading or being usurped by evil traitors to him. So there's a lot of themes going on in the play that are about balance and imbalance and bringing together these different worlds and bringing it into a state where people can move forward and change after this tremendous upheaval of the Tempest. Directing Tempest is challenging because there's a lot of music, there's a lot of spiritual stuff going on, there's a lot of difficulties just in staging something as big as a storm at sea when you're on a stage in a situation where you've got an audience sitting. How do you create a realistic, believable storm and get your audience to become part of that world? So one of the things we did is we threw pretty much everything that we had at the Tempest at the beginning. We had the people on the ship. We had actors portraying waves with large pieces of fabric. We had sound effects, lighting effects. We had Ariel cracking a bullwhip to indicate the strikes of lightning on the deck of the ship. And we brought fire onto the stage. We had some fire dancers who brought actual open flame onto the stage and were able to create the idea of ball lightning rolling across the deck of the ship while all this was going on. And underneath all that, just accenting the whole thing, we had the wonderful vocal music created by Reva Sherrard, which just added a whole other level to what was going on. It was one of the most interesting ways to perform that I've had the experience with, and hopefully it worked. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to view the Stratford production of The Tempest at this time. And perhaps you've had the opportunity to see other versions of The Tempest, either on film or on stage before. It's interesting and enlightening to watch different interpretations of the same piece. It's a lot of fun to get to perform them. And I'm just happy to be able to introduce this production and this discussion and explore these ideas even more in different ways.